Hi guys, welcome to Pragmatic Politics. I'm Colby Cons, and today we're talking about the post office. So, the U.S. Postal Service has been under attack by Trump and the Republicans for some time now, a couple months, specifically focused around the fact that they are convinced that mail-in voting is rife with interference and voter fraud, even though there's no statistical evidence of there being any significant voter fraud involving mail-in voting ever in the history of the United States. They're still claiming that, and as in my last video that I made, Trump is even telling people to vote by mail once, then go in and vote again. So this voter fraud that they're so scared of, Trump is one of the people actively encouraging voter fraud. So this whole thing has been absolutely crazy. And we're going to get down through this and go through the timeline of what's been going on with the post office and why the Republicans are under such heat from this. So it all started with Trump's famous tweet saying, "Universal mail-in voting, not absentee voting, which is good. 2020 will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent election in history. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA. Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote." Obviously, this is ridiculous. We have never delayed or postponed an election. Even during the Civil War, we had an election on time. Secondly, there is no difference between universal mail-in voting and absentee voting, because anyone can request an absentee mail-in ballot. So it's the same exact process. You just request it. And universal mail-in voting is not much different. You still request it. They send everyone a piece of paper that says, sign this if you want a mail-in ballot. It's the same thing. And Trump has even voted by mail in the past several elections and plans to vote by mail this election too. So it's absolutely crazy. And in the history of every election, there has been no significant evidence of voter fraud ever causing any issues. So obviously a lot of heat blew up. Republicans and Democrats alike were railing against Trump for this terrible take, for trying to delay the election, making up the fact that universal mail-in voting is not inaccurate, which he still is pushing that take. The next big event in the Postal Service saga was that a new Postmaster General was selected. And I have the full timeline about him right here. So, Louis DeJoy, the North Carolina man that Trump put in charge of the post office after he and his wife gave Republicans millions. I went through this article already. We can briefly go through it. But basically, the new Postmaster DeJoy has been in Trump's pocket for years, since the 2016 election, actually. Briefly, you can look through this. Louis DeJoy, President Trump's controversial new U.S. Postmaster General, has raised millions for Republican politicians and political candidates in his home state of North Carolina, along with his wife, Trump's nominee for the ambassador to Canada. So, massive donors to Trump and Republicans have now been given huge positions as an ambassador to Canada and as the new U.S. Postmaster General. He's given close to $1 million in donations since Trump became president, and over that time, their own political fortunes have risen considerably. During the 2016 election, DeJoy and Walz together gave the Republican National Committee more than $250,000. And they spent a total of $550,000 on federal elections during the 2016 cycle. Trump and Vice President Mike Pence have been at the same event as DeJoy at least 10 times since 2016, including private fundraisers and giant public rallies. Since their election, Trump and Pence have each separately visited North Carolina specifically to attend high-dollar fundraisers at DeJoy and Walz's Greensboro mansion. Over the years, the couple has raised big money for Bush, McCain, Romney, and Trump. They also backed other presidential candidates, including Jeb Bush, early on in the 2016 race, and Rudy Giuliani in 2008. Basically, the article goes through the entire history of DeJoy in all of his dealings with the different Republican presidential candidates, all the different people he supported, all the money that he's raised for them. Trump has name-dropped him in multiple rallies and multiple speeches. And when you get down to it, basically DeJoy has been in bed with Trump since the very beginning, and now Trump has put him in charge of the United States Postal Service right during an election, and now they're starting to slow down the Postal Service. On May 6th, the Trump administration announced that DeJoy had been elected to lead the USPS after a unanimous vote from its Board of Governors. DeJoy does have experience working with USPS in the country's mail system. It's his shipping company's multi-billion-dollar contract with the Postal Service that brought him from New York to North Carolina in the early 1990s, and he served as president at the supply chain giant XPO Logistics until 2016. And then he was part of the board of directors at the same company until 2018. Critics and Democrats seized upon Trump's appointment of a longtime donor and fundraiser to head the federal agency tasked with efficiently delivering mail-in ballots in November. Trump has relentlessly and baselessly attacked mail-in voting as rife for fraud and interference, despite the fact that he plans to vote in Florida via absentee ballot. He has resisted efforts to infuse USPS with enough cash to allow it to deliver ballots efficiently by various state deadlines. Trump's rhetoric is part of an effort to cast aspersions on the election as he faces a double-digit polling deficit against Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, and it precedes a November vote that could take days, if not weeks, to count because of the unusual number of people voting by mail. As a result, both chambers of Congress have hauled DeJoy in for questioning about USPS and the election. He testified Friday before the Senate and on Monday appeared before the House Oversight Committee. So as we can see, DeJoy is in bed with Trump and has donated almost $1 million to Trump and other Republican nominees, and now has received the position of U.S. Postmaster General. And guess what he started doing since he became Postmaster General? This election has been filled with talk about election interference, about voter fraud, about the post office not being able to handle the amount of vote-by-mail ballots. And guess what the postmaster has started doing? 40% of letter handling machines are dismantled in Seattle-Tacoma area. By the time Postmaster General Louis DeJoy halted a raft of changes that might slow down the U.S. mail, the Postal Service had already shut down 40% of the high-speed letter sorting machines in the Seattle-Tacoma area. There's been a huge uproar over the removal of postal equipment and reductions of retail service hours and worker overtime, and the Trump administration's Postmaster General announced on Tuesday he was going to put the initiatives on hold until November. Basically, as soon as he became in charge of the post office, he started not allowing overtime in the post office, and he started dismantling postal equipment like these high-speed letter sorting machines, and he's had reductions of retail service hours. He has done everything he can to slow down the Postal Service. Right in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, the Postmaster General is slowing down the USPS. He's removing machines. They've even gone around and started removing those blue little boxes that they have on the street corners in highly populated areas. They've started taking those out. They're making it harder for you to mail things, and they're making it harder for them to deal with the increased amount of mail they're getting. This seems weird. Why would we be dismantling the post office during a pandemic and during an election? Maybe because Trump wants this. Maybe because the massive donor to Trump and fellow Republicans is now in charge of the post office after Trump has said he wants to halt mail-in voting. Now, you might think this is just a giant conspiracy that the Democrats have come up with, saying that they're purposely blaming DeJoy for slowing down the election and all this because of Trump when Trump has nothing to do with it. Well, guess what? Trump just admitted he's sabotaging the USPS to screw up the election. So it's not really a conspiracy, is it? Something that he's supposed to keep quiet, he said out loud. He admitted he's intentionally withholding money from the U.S. Postal Service to undermine its ability to handle mail-in voting in the 2020 election. Here's a quote from him. "They need that money in order to make the post office work so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. But if they don't get those two items, that means you can't have universal mail-in voting because they're not equipped to have it." The comments make clear why Trump and congressional Republicans have steadfastly refused to grant the post office money in the latest round of negotiations over coronavirus stimulus. Trump has long attacked mail voting as fraud-prone, even though there's little evidence that's true, and he sees slowdowns at the post office as a way to screw up mail voting. This is crazy. Widespread delays in ballot delivery could disenfranchise millions of people, leading to widespread chaos and potentially swing a close election. Polls show that Democrats are increasingly likely to use mail voting as a safe way to cast a ballot during the pandemic, while Trump's attacks on mail voting have pushed Republicans away from the method they've often used in the past. So, Democrats are more likely to vote by mail, Republicans aren't. Trump is now actively hurting voting by mail by sabotaging the post office, and he's admitting to it. So, it's absolutely crazy. Post office is completely under attack by Trump, and it gets even worse from here. It turns out that Postmaster General DeJoy, who gave 400,000 to Republicans just this year, has between 30 and 75 million in assets of direct competitors to the United States Postal Service. So the Postmaster General of the U.S. Postal Service, who's supposed to be helping the post office, making it more efficient, more effective, especially during this time of a worldwide pandemic, has 30 to 75 million assets of direct competitors. So that means if he is destroying the Postal Service, if he is making it less efficient and less effective, he actually has monetary incentive to do that. He has money in FedEx, and also in his former company, and in UPS. So all these private companies that make money off of mail, they gain more service, more business when the USPS is not doing well. So the Postmaster General is hurting and dismantling the Postal Service, and he is gaining money directly from this because of his investments in direct competitors. This is a huge conflict of interest. So when DeJoy was appointed Postmaster General in May, government documents show that he and his wife have tens of millions of dollars invested in companies that provide services similar to the USPS. DeJoy is a former chairman and CEO of New Breed Logistics, a contract logistics firm in North Carolina. The company helped the USPS process mail for more than 25 years. In 2014, DeJoy sold the company to XPO Logistics for $600 million. XPO says it's a top 10 global provider of transportation and logistics services and is valued at more than $7.5 billion. As part of the 2014 deal, DeJoy joined the board of XPO and agreed to use $30 million of his proceeds to buy stock in the company. Where is the rest of the assets? Well, DeJoy is married to Aldona Walsh, a former U.S. ambassador to Estonia who's been nominated to serve as an ambassador to Canada. The Washington Post reported in June that DeJoy and Walsh hold between $30 million and $75 million in assets in USPS competitors or contractors, according to Walsh's financial disclosure paperwork filed with the Government of Ethics. XPO, they have 30 to 75 million. The UPS, they have 115 to 300,000. JB Hunt Transport Services, 1 to 15,000. Forward Air Corp, 1 to 15,000. And Saia Inc., 1 to 15,000. The majority are in XPO. XPO arranges more than 10 million last mile deliveries per year. The company could benefit from a weakened USPS. So clearly, not only do the Republicans and Trump gain in the election circumstances from hurting the USPS, but DeJoy also personally gains financially when he hurts the USPS. Yesterday, an article came out about DeJoy's donations to the GOP and to Trump. And we already know he's donated almost $1 million to Trump and the GOP starting from 2016, and he's done 1.6 million over the last 20 years. It's a lot of donations. Well, it turns out that the USPS Postmaster General was giving bonuses to former employees who donated to GOP candidates. This is highly illegal. Their former employees were urged by DeJoy and his aides to make political contributions to GOP candidates. The former employees told the Post that they were reimbursed for their contributions with bonus payments. Business Insider previously reported that DeJoy himself had raised millions for Republican politicians as a major GOP fundraiser, and DeJoy has been at the forefront of a series of drastic cost-cutting measures in the USPS that have been associated with delayed mail delivery, prompting concerns for mail-in ballots in the upcoming election. It is illegal for you to pressure employees to donate political contributions and then to use money from your company to give employees bonuses for making these donations. That is so illegal. It is crazy. You cannot do that. There are specific donating laws in place for this reason. It blows my mind the level of corruption we've reached in the GOP. It's absolutely crazy. And the final report came out today that the heat is on. Legal experts say Postmaster General has committed a stunning array of crimes, including wire fraud. Under federal law, having someone else make a campaign finance contribution on your behalf is expressly illegal. Reimbursing someone for a contribution or otherwise contributing in the name of another person can result in substantial civil penalties and jail time. The FEC and the Department of Justice have prosecuted several such cases over the last few years. These violations sometimes occur when an individual who has already contributed up to the limit to a campaign gives money to another person to make a contribution to the same candidate. It is against the law to directly or indirectly reimburse someone for a political contribution. State law also prohibits the practice, and so there's no statute of limitations for violations of the state statute, which are felonies. Stein declined to comment further, aside from saying that the appropriate authorities should be investigating the claims. Using straw donors is a crime because it allows fundraisers to cheat campaign contribution limits. If the report is true that DeJoy committed this conduct in 2016, then the heat is on. 5-year statute of limitations won't run until 2021. So we can clearly see that this whole thing reeks of corruption. Massive GOP donor to Trump and the Republicans is suddenly put in charge of the post office. The post office is suddenly slowing down mail, removing sorting machines, refusing overtime, reducing the hours that workers are allowed to work, all under the guise of efficiency and that the USPS isn't profitable. Guess what? The USPS isn't supposed to be profitable. It is a government service. It is not a business. The USPS is supposed to provide mail to anyone and everyone in the entire country. Of course it's not profitable for someone to run into bumfuck the middle of nowhere or go to Alaska for mail. That's why the private companies don't do it, and that's why the USPS is the one delivering mails to all these rural areas. Hurting the USPS hurts American citizens. You will no longer be getting mail if you live in the middle of nowhere because it's not profitable for these companies to deliver mail to you. That's why the USPS is an integral part of America, and it's actually in our Constitution that the government should always provide an efficient mail service system for all of its citizens. And the GOP is currently attacking that system. So it's absolutely ridiculous to me that these changes are under the guise of profitability. They specifically won't let the Postal Service charge more for stamps, which would increase its profitability, but they'll slow down the overtime and they'll remove mail sorting machines. It makes absolutely no sense. This is clearly just to undermine the election. Trump even admitted these changes are to specifically undermine the election. And as we went through all these different articles, we can clearly see the level of corruption that the Postmaster General DeJoy is involved in and with the Trump administration. He's giving them massive donations, he's hosting huge billion-dollar fundraisers, and he's telling employees to donate to the GOP and to Trump, and he's reimbursing them with bonuses, which is so illegal, as we just went over. It's absolutely crazy. I can't believe that people believe that Trump is playing fair and that it's the Democrats who are trying to rig the election when we have clear evidence of the Republicans interfering in the election and in the Postal Service system. That's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to my channel and hit a like if you enjoyed the content. Until next time.